You know who I'm talking for, and if I get it wrong, it's on me. If I get it right, it's on God. So, good morning. Good morning. It is so very tempting to talk about this saintly wife that is described in Proverbs, who seems to be the woman who does it all. Now, I'm only going to make a few comments about that and then move on. The comment I want to make is, if you listen to this from a perspective of the place of women in most societies at the time this was written down, which was before Jesus, the Proverbs were, look at how independently this woman behaves. Look at the endeavors. She has wisdom. She can cook. She sews. She sells merchandise. She's in the market. She's making money. She gets up, but I mean, this is an A-type woman. She's an A-type human being. She's the kind of person I've never been, which is do it all with a smile on your face and with perfection. So I would just say that maybe this is a little bit idealistic, to say the least. On the other hand, in their culture, it was an immensely liberating and liberative statement. Women weren't allowed to own property in most of the world, for most of history, since property started being owned anyway, except in certain matrilineal type cultures. She's able to go out and do things in the market. She can sell. She lead commerce. The only thing she seems to be excluded from is being one of the elders at the gate. She only gets complimented by the men who are the elders at the gate. So they have a little ways to go. But in general, I just want to point to this and say that this ideal of the Jewish woman is a very liberated view of women, much expanded over what most women were allowed to do. So again, though certainly they were a patriarchal culture, in the seeds of liberation and equality for all are planted so early in our biblical literature. I just want to point that out. But it's clear that if we were to then move to James and the gospel, there's a pretty significantly obvious connection between those who have power and how it's used. How do we use the power we have over other people? Now, most of the time, again, because we have such a media-dominated culture, we think of powerful people being somebody else. Somebody who has some lofty position or in business or the military or government, whatever. But the truth is, almost every one of us in some place in our life have had power over somebody else. If it was nothing more than our children. We lived in situations where we had power over others. And most of us, probably all of us, have had worked in systems where others had power over us. I've been an Episcopal clergyman since 1980, and I have always been accountable to a bishop somewhere. So there was someone who had authority. And so power and authority can go together well, or power and authority can go together poorly. And that's what's described here. It's not power itself. It's not holding positions of large responsibility and great effect. Somebody's got to do that if there's going to be an organized society. Some people have to be raised up to the top of levels of decision making in a culture of 320 million people, in the most dynamic and wealthy economy ever known in the world. It takes some kind of smart people. Smart people make it to the top. The question is, are the people at the top only the ruthless ones? It's that sense of, is one climbing to position out of selfish ambition, or because one knows you can give good service in some realm of human society? I've talked about this before in our Episcopal Service Corps, which is a program we started at St. Paul's and has a house here in downtown Denver. And young adults who apply, who finished college, come and spend about 10, 11 months working in a nonprofit in the community and living in community with one another, developing a rule of life, and then working with their clergy supervisors to do reflection on the work they do, theological reflection. How is God present in the work you're doing, whatever they might be, some in the environment, some in human helping kinds of ways. But the point is that as a church, we poured some very significant resources into a few young adults. But the reason is that if there is a way for the church to be an incubator for people who can do public service, not out of envy and personal ambition and the desire for wealth and all that brings, but truly because they have learned how to be a servant leader, then we affect how power is exercised. And that's how the church, and certainly the Episcopal Church historically as the church of the elite in America, have seen the foundation of schools and colleges, all these different things we did that were different than just building a church to worship in, were because we recognize that society needs well-formed Christian leaders. Not the kind that certain people talk about. Not the Christian leader who doesn't have to be Christian or act Christian or have any Christian policies and still gets supported by Christians. But Christians who actually see their role as being a servant to their people. Some of the most successful CEOs in all of America are people who knew how to bring up the people under them. They didn't see the people under them as threats to their position. They saw them as assets to the mission of their organization and developed them and found those people with the leadership qualities, with the best of them have ethics. They do know right from wrong. And they don't want to do wrong. We sometimes forget that the servant leaders are the ones that never get press. You never hear about the CEO who's out on the floor visiting with his managers in his company. You hear about the guy that's making $50 million flying all over the world. But all through our culture and all through our history, the church has been the incubator for those who saw public service as the pursuit of justice and righteousness for a people. That we live in right relationship, that things are ordered so that people are cared for, a society in which there will always be poor. Jesus said it. The poor will always be among you. There will always be those who can't seem to make it, especially in our kind of culture, where it takes so much knowledge and self-assertion and confidence and people pushing you along. I mean, if I didn't have my family all say, my parents were the first people in their family to ever go to college and get a degree. My sister and I both got master's degrees. But that's because from the time I was probably 2, I was being told I was going to college. I may have lived on a cotton farm in a place way out in the middle of nowhere, But it was never in my mind that I would do anything else because I had those people who wanted to raise me up. Boy Scout masters who taught me some values and how to work in a team and how to be the leader of a team, to even if it was just to put up a tent, you know? How do you do that without making everybody mad? How do you do it without going around boasting, I got that tent up, while the other three guys are going, you know? You see, we learn those things or we don't. And if we don't have that sense of peace in us, then there is no wisdom. Look at what it says about wisdom. Wisdom is first pure, second peaceable, righteous, and at peace. If I can be that way within myself, out of my own spiritual journey, my prayer life, my learning to restrain my worst impulses, believe me, they're there. Then I don't have to be in conflict. Oh Lord, protect whoever that is for. I don't have to push other people aside. I don't have to hurt or cheat or take shortcuts. Because if I am a good servant to those who have less than me, who somehow I have power over or authority over, whether it's my children, whether it's my parish, whether it's, you know, whatever it is, being president of the Lions Club or whatever, if I am a servant of those for whom I have been elected, then I'm acting as Jesus would have me. When I'm puffed up and saying, what more can you do for me? Then I've crossed. Real practical stuff, but it's stuff that's important. Because it really comes down to what causes war in the world, except that people don't have something they want and they decide the way to get it is with violence and force. Or there are oppressors who so oppress a people that they can no longer live human lives under. That will raise violence. It's very difficult to be a peaceable person in a violent world full of disputes, isn't it? But that's what we're called to be. I have to be a servant of you whether you vote Republican or Democrat. The prayer book doesn't give me a choice about that. I'm to be your servant whether you're rich or poor or in the middle. The ordination vows don't give me a choice about that. It doesn't matter what your cultural heritage is, how strong or weak your faith may be. The ordination vows say that I am your servant, not your master. A lot of clergy get that confused at various points in their career, but it's not just me, it's every realm of life. So if you go out of here in any kind of sense of what can you do, is just think whatever people you have an influence with, even if it's just your immediate family at this point in time or your neighbor, be a servant. Be a servant. And in that service, you will be leading people to the notion of a living Christ.